Hello, hello. Welcome to the broadcast and welcome to the open book series, A Page from a Married Couple's Perspective. And today I am honored and thankful to welcome Joe and Keijo Bollinger. So welcome to the broadcast.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Eva.
You're welcome. Well, let me share a little bit about Joe and Keijo, and then we'll get into asking questions. And if you have questions that you'd like to ask them, feel free to put those in the comments. And if you missed the live, don't worry. Put your questions in the comments and we will get back to you. So let me share a little bit about Joe and Keijo. This is Joe and Keijo Bollinger. Together with their 4 children, God has called them to devote themselves to fulfilling the Great Commission by engaging the curious and equipping the follower so people can find their place in God's story. So welcome to the open book series. And we are sponsored by the Great Grace Bible Church Couples Ministry.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. And feel free to share a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Go ahead, babe.
Well, you go ahead.
Well, I'm Joe, and I don't know what to say.
How long have you guys been married?
We've been married for 12 years.
We just had our 12th anniversary.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Woo! Praise God. It was wonderful, too.
Well,
we had a great anniversary.
Well, that's wonderful. And I was honored to be at your wedding. Well, it's hard to believe it's 12 years ago.
Well, Eva, you were at our wedding, and you also had the anointed post of just being the more experienced woman meeting with me. I don't know if you remember, but I came to your house and you just had a talk with me as just a more experienced woman in life and just helping me to prepare as I stepped into marriage. So you not only came to the wedding, but you kind of had your own unique role.
Oh, I forgot about that. I enjoy doing that and helping engage women get married, get ready for the marriage journey and adventure. Well, I want to go ahead and get started and ask you some questions. This month in our Facebook group, we are for the last 2 months. Last month our topic was couples, and this month it's blended families. But today we're going to be talking about families, and I'm going to be asking you some questions about your family. One of the topics that we had in last month was health and wellness, and how, in terms of health and wellness, what are some of the things you do to ensure your family's health and wellness?
Well, I think now that we've had a second to be on here now I'm ready to say something about myself, which is
okay.
And then I'll tie into the health and wellness. Just that, we are parents. We have 4 children. They are four children. The oldest was 4 years old when we had our 4th child. And so I feel like we're learning as we go. So I feel like we're right in there with every other parent of children. Our oldest is 11 and our youngest is 6 and 6 right now. And so I feel like we are coming from a posture of having things all figured out. We are right there with you and everybody else figuring things out as we go. And then not to mention there's a pandemic happening.
Right.
We are like trying to figure all that out as we go. Like we were once a very kind of low tech family, very little screen time. Well, that is totally changed right now. Like, where do you think our children are right now as we are on this, broadcast? So anyway, and for health and wellness, I think, I can speak a little bit, and I think you have some more to say too. We tend to be a very outdoors family. I take our kids exploring around our community and our neighborhood. We are that family that you'll find down by the pond, walking around the neighborhood, in the basketball court, riding bikes, doing those kind of things. The pandemic honestly affected all of that movement a lot, like just from a physical, having to be so much more careful. But as things change and the situation changes, we are finding ourselves outside and a lot more active than we have been the last year, at least.
Okay.
There's a couple of things that come to mind. I'll see if I can remember them all, since the pandemic's affecting how I remember well.
It's affected all of us.
Yeah. I think one of the first things that came to mind is being willing to change. Mm-hmm. And we're just a somewhat recent example of that. I mean, in the past couple of years, is that our children were going to a school that was a private Christian school. We wanted to go there for that reason. But while we were there, we really just discovered that it wasn't the environment that one of our kids in particular needed to thrive based on what they needed to learn. Mm-hmm. And so just being willing to make a change, to move to, for us, that meant moving to our neighborhood school. And it ended up being just a really life-giving decision for our family, even for our kids who weren't the reason for the change. One of our kids, we discovered they actually are kind of a big fish and they need a big pond. So for them, it wasn't that they needed a small environment. They needed a bigger environment with more freedom. Okay. And then as parents, and we don't really have family that live here year round. Mm-hmm. The school we were in was a great school in lots of ways. It was a very high involvement school. Well, for us, we just really experienced a lot of lift and margin as they were able, like for the first time, all of our kids were in school all day for the first time. And that was just a lift for margin. I was able to have time to engage in some things that I hadn't engaged in that were helpful for me as well. And so that was the first thing that came to mind, was just being willing to consider change. So that was one expression of that. We've seen that play out in terms of ministry, in terms of God calling us to different things. And also just something that we've done at different times. We have engaged in counseling. We've engaged in marital counseling. Our first year of marriage was like, woo! And, we don't have any wilting flowers in this marriage, and so it was a good thing to step in. And we've done that. And that wasn't the only time that we stepped into it. So that's when I think about health and wellness. That's another thing that I think about. And there was one last thing, I'll tie up because I'm sure you have a couple other questions, but a few years ago, we traveled overseas with our kids, and a friend of ours who has a counseling background, she just was encouraging us to process daily instead of waiting to the end of the experience to process, that as we went, that we do highs and lows as a family. And that ended up being a really healthy thing to do. So that along the way, we could give words to, this thing was hard, or give words. Even one of our kids, God used to say, this is hard, but also gave them words of hope, but it won't last forever. So it just ended up being a really helpful, tool that we employed in that season. So those are a few things
that's interesting. Tell me how the question, talking to the children about what are your highs and lows. Give me one example of what that kind of looked like.
Well, yeah, and you might want to jump in if there's something that I forget to say, but at the end of the day, so we were in this really small country called Guinea-Bissau. Mm-hmm. It's in West Africa, and we were kind of staying in a village. And at the end of the day, we were just around the dinner table with our kids, and we're going through that. I think we were maybe this particular day we were saying, has God spoken to you? Actually, is there anything that God has said to you? And so this is a little bit different than I initially said, but our daughter, our oldest daughter, well, we didn't realize it, but it turns out she's very allergic to Malarone, which is a malaria preventive drug that lots of people take when they travel. So she got really sick while we were there. And one of the things she articulated is that God, that she wouldn't, God had communicated to her that she wouldn't get malaria, right? That she wouldn't, because we had to take her off the medicine.
Right.
So that was just encouraging. Do I have my facts straight? That was a few years ago.
Now, we had someone that made the comment that said that they have found it helpful in their family to process daily at dinner or family Bible time.
I was just going to say, it usually happens over a meal, like at some point. Yeah. And in the mornings, we do family Bible time before we step into the day, like usually while people are scrambling around the kitchen pouring their cereal. One of us is trying to read a passage from the Bible.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, and we do that. We try to do that on weekdays, like school days.
Okay.
And we call it FaceTime, and it's kind of like, I want to see your face, and we're just kind of trying to make our way through the Bible. Sometimes there's some editing, because we have a range of ages.
But I will say, reading through 1st and 2nd Kings is like the most thrilling thing for our elementary age kids, only because of all of the details that are in there. They're just like, that's in the Bible?
Yeah, that's in the Bible.
That's not in any of the stories we see.
And I also walk a lot. That's also another thing as far as health. It's so good just for my mental part of things, not to mention just physically. That's been something that I've taken up within the past couple of years. So, yeah.
Well, welcome to the viewers. We have some viewers watching. I wanted to say welcome. And my next question to you is, as an interracial couple in today's environment, how has this impacted you as a couple? And what are some of the ways you deal with everything that's going on?
That's a really hard question to answer, not because we don't have words, but because it's been really hard for us. It's been really hard. I come from a very rural environment where everyone looks like me. And it's been really discouraging and heartbreaking to watch people responding to the issues that we're seeing around our country on social media, where they can assume that their words are falling on people that look and think just like them all the time. And then there's me, and there's our family, and it hurts to be exposed to the inner workings of people that were part of my upbringing and shaping of who I am, who I respect, saying the things and liking the things and sharing the things that they do. So there's been a lot of kind of redrawing of personal boundary lines for me personally, and lots of what's the word? Phone calls, just off the social media page, off the news feed, phone calls to ask clarifying questions about things that have been said or comments have been made. Yeah, it's been really hard. been the hardest year of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think among us, just within our family, we have the full diversity of not only race, there's cultural, some specific cultural things that are outside of mainstream culture. Just it's a dynamic in our heritage that we're grateful for. And then there's also just the diversity of political opinions. There's a diversity of opinions about the pandemic. Really, every opinion, it's probably just about as represented within our family. And so that can be, just kind of it can be a good place to be in some respect, because sometimes I think if everybody is saying the same thing that I'm saying around me, then I'm probably in too much of a homogenous environment.
Mm-hmm.
But with that is challenged because everybody doesn't get where you come from, right?
Right.
But I think between the two of us, when it comes to race and culture, I'm really glad that the Lord has just given opportunities, just which to, like, Joe has engaged in some of his own work in these areas in the past. And for me, because we do have different cultures, it's, being male and female, we're not the same.
Right.
And so it's part of the expression of, I think, having the opportunity to love the other, if that makes sense. So it's one expression of that that's important to both of us. And also, it's been extremely painful for us both to watch just the killings of all of these Black boys and men. I mean, we have 2 sons. And so, at one point, it's just like, did we just get up out of this place?
Yeah.
Did we just round it up,
Yeah.
But I mean, internally, it was a little bit of it was a thought, and then, quickly it's like, I don't sense that God's saying, abandon ship. This is where God has us, in this time, in this place. But to be honest, in some ways, it can feel easier to be like, let's just go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just.
And that's, I mean, that's normal. I think, it's speaking to other people and other believers. They've said, you know what, that thought has come to them. So you're not alone with that. But now the second part of my question is, how do you discuss, not so much what's going on, how do you discuss this with your children to make them aware of what's going on? How do you deal with that part? For, and that can be helpful for other parents who have small children. The challenge to, how maybe you dealt with it.
We are very careful with what we communicate. We talk about things, I feel like, in a very age appropriate ways. And I also think we bring our global experience to the table when we talk about things. We often talk about things, I feel like, from a kingdom of God perspective, not like we are Americans first, but we are God's people.
Amen.
And we live in this place right now. And in this place, this is what is happening. I've noticed us talking about it that way, so that, like, I feel like we could be in any place. It doesn't, but here we are in this place, in this country. And I think we also handle things with a willingness to be critical of the place that we are in, not assuming that this is the greatest place on earth. this is a place on earth in a very fallen and broken world. And that has also impacted this place. And many are the ways that it is broken. And our hope is not in these leaders and these borders and this government or this expression of the government system. We try, I can see, like, I've noticed that we don't ever try to promote any of these earthly kingdom ways in our home. They're just ways. They're just, capitalism is just a way. Democracy is just a way. We don't talk about them and weave them together with Christianity and following Jesus. It's just, how do we follow Jesus in this setting that we're in?
I think I'd add to that. We also have talked just practically, like if you are around a police officer, this, you need to, I don't know, do what they say, whatever, trying to talk with them about if you're engaging with police officers, even in our neighborhood, what to do. And so I feel like that'll be an ongoing thing. Our kids are still, they're not in high school, so they don't understand all of, they're not in the place to understand like all of the things, but they know, like, for them right now, they have impressions that sometimes we have to try to speak to. So it's like they can have the impression that all white people are bad sometimes, because when they're hearing things, it seems like those are the people that they're hearing doing some of those things. So sometimes we have to remind them that there are, in simple terms, there's good people and bad people. There's good and bad people with brown skin. There's good and bad people with white skin. It's you have to consider the heart, and also, like, don't bring your pocket knife to the lake. And so there's kind of these different things, and then sometimes it's like, also needing to, I can see needing to just like affirm like how you uniquely are made is a good thing.
Right.
Like how your curls and, that's how God made you. Or, the other night we were watching well, I hate to say the movies because someone's going to hate the movie you mentioned.
Well,
we were watching A Wrinkle in Time with some of our kids. And I just love that one part where Oprah Winfrey's talking to the main character, and she's like, and the main character is expressing, really, she doesn't like herself. And she's like, you do not realize all of the specific decisions that have come to this point to make you. And when I heard that, to my one specific kid, it's just like, I just kind of was like, that's you, babe. Because it's like, so there's that sense also where there can be a sense of internalizing a lessness about self that I can see needs to be built into the opposite of, affirming who they are for one of our kids too. So we're still learning in that. It's weird because it's like, I don't have a handbook on this is how I, and the truth is you can teach your kids, but that doesn't mean that they that's going to be safe, right?
We do the best we can and ask God to intervene and to help us. And so, that's how it is. Now, I'm sorry. My next question. I've got a lot of questions here.
Where's your mic?
Where our time is going. We also talked about in the Facebook group about immediate families and in-laws. So my next question is, how do you balance your relationship with your extended family? And then how do you solve conflicts with your extended family?
Well, our family they don't live here. And so
that makes it much less rough.
In terms of like how frequent that we get to interact, I think that we have I think we have a good relationship with my mother.
We do. I feel like Keijo's mom is amazing. She's amazing.
But as an example,
with her.
As an example, though, like holidays, how do you decide whether you're going to visit Keijo's family or you're going to visit Joe's family for Christmas? And how does, in terms of the family, both sides of the family, how does that, is there ever any like, oh, how come you're not coming to us for Christmas? You went to them last time, that kind of thing. Have you experienced anything like that?
One thing is, with my family being in Pennsylvania and her family being in the Pacific Northwest, and we live in Orlando, during the holiday seasons, my parents are already down here in the wintertime. Okay. They're further south, but they come down, they're snowbirds. Mm-hmm. And it's like a place that people want to come when it's cold up there. So it's made it easier for us. Thanksgiving has been a big, like we invite our families, both sides, to come to our house and we host it. We've had to own and forge our way with our holidays. Like we've really owned it for ourselves, I feel like.
And early on we did, actually.
Early on we did it, and just like we're like kind of like to our family, it's like, well, we're gonna do this and you're invited. And here's what we're going to do. Okay. We're going to host Thanksgiving. You're invited. And this is what it's going to look like. So somehow we've gotten into that pattern. And I think just because our family isn't here, we've felt like we've had to do that. Like, what do we as a family do to celebrate each holiday? And I think, I don't know that we might be more, I think a lot of adult children feel a very a sense to really cater to please their parents and their families, and maybe feel a lot of pressure to please families. I don't know, but I don't feel like we have the pressure. We don't. If it's there, we don't receive it.
Okay. Well, I think that it's helpful for others to know that you've kind of owned it and you've said it. And it is, when you live in Florida and you have family up north, it is easier. They're like, oh, we're coming to visit you. We don't want to go to the
park. And when our kids were super little, so I was pregnant with our third child, and we had a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we traveled to the Pacific Northwest to spend some time there. Mm-hmm. And it was just a lot to travel that far with little kids at the time. And after that, I think we just kind of realized, and we've realized even since then, we really like to be home for Christmas, because we really like to own our own traditions with our immediate family. And we just really love being home for Christmas. And so we've incorporated rhythms to that invite, like we get to spend time with Joe's mom and dad. They come, usually they come. This was a different kind of a year for us too, but they usually will come like on Christmas Day. And Thanksgiving has become a time when both of our parents, my father died a couple years ago, but even when he was alive, it would just be my mom really who would come. And then Joe's parents would come. And that became kind of a tradition.
Well, that's good. My next question for you is, what is your biggest challenge raising 4 small children, and how do you balance it?
They outnumber us.
And they use us against each other to find out any little inconsistency and then capitalize on it.
Yeah. How would you, is there anything that you would?
Every time we are unified on an issue, it's like great success. But since we are different people, my wife and I, we also can easily be divided. So
and children are good at doing that. So one of the things I remember, when my children were younger and they tried to do that, we would say, what did your mother say? What did your dad say? And then dad said no. Well, then I'm saying no too. It's trying to stay united, because they will try to divide you.
I know. And sometimes it's like, I just need to go verify what you're telling me. Yeah. And then sometimes it's like, I have, he'll clarify, I didn't actually say that at all. So
I have some specific questions that came in. At what age, what's your age for purchasing cell phones for your children?
Well, they don't have a cell phone yet.
Okay.
And so, again, our oldest is 11. Mm-hmm. Our youngest is 6. So our oldest is just going to middle school next year in the fall. And so, I don't know. They may get some. We haven't had the summit where we decide that as a couple just yet.
Well, put that on your list.
So it'll be on the list. So this may be the year that the oldest gets some form of communication. I don't know if it'll be your traditional cell phone, because there's so many things where you can keep in touch that aren't quite the traditional cell phone now, but we'll see. So, okay,
my next question is, someone has asked, do you allow your children to sleep in bed with you regularly?
No, not ever.
Never. Not even as babies.
Not ever.
I think we did even just in our bedroom with our firstborn, and we were like, this is not going to work. Like, the child needs to be out of this room. So we never did.
Okay. My next question is, how much TV/computer screen time do you allow for your children?
As much as possible. Right now, I'm
with the pandemic. Come on, you guys. With the pandemic, we're all trying to survive.
Okay,
I'm not saying it's right.
Okay. Let me preface that. Pre-pandemic, how much TV computer screen time did you allow for your children before the pandemic?
Before the pandemic, there was like a 2-hour window at the end of the day, which allowed us to connect, supper to get made, the house to get kind of tidied up. And then that was it. Usually, wasn't it like something like from like 3 to 5 or something? They would have, we called it computer time.
Okay.
But now they're on the screen
all the time. Yeah.
And then it's just for breaks. There's games that they like to play. Some of them are educational. Some of them are not.
I would say not all computer time is the same.
That's true.
If it's like the other day, the girls wanted to do a meetup on something called Prodigy, which is a math game that kids in the schools have. So they had some friends that live in another neighborhood, and they logged on and they played it together. And so I'm like, first of all, I can't believe you guys want to play a math game together. But so I don't see it all as the same, but probably up until. But we have, we've been more on the stringent side.
Yeah.
For what they've watched up until they went to the elementary school, I would say. And then the pandemic's just been very different.
Someone says, yes, stay united. One voice. One voice for parents. My next to the last question is, as our time is kind of going, is what are some ways that you maintain a relationship as a couple? With your family and work and all the responsibilities, how do you maintain your relationship?
We have had a handful of in-house dates during the pandemic where we put a movie on for the kids upstairs, and we set up our bedroom with like a little table and, have a meal and talk and just shut off the phones. And it's just connecting that way. And I think any time that we have to carve out, whether it's early in the morning or after the kids are in bed, to connect, we try to do that. You know, going out on dates and getting a sitter and all that hasn't happened this year. We haven't been doing that. So it's been hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just, I mean, it sounds really trite, but I do think that we really experienced God's grace at different times. Like, it just where God will maybe work in one of us to help us, just, you know, like he's in our marriage with us. So those things are helpful. But yeah, we do miss our dates. And, you know, the other night, like Joe said, we've done some dates in our room. Like we did send the kids upstairs. We're like, here's some takeout food and here's a movie for you. And we're just going to have our own meal, you know, downstairs. Or actually we have an avocado tree in our backyard. Just the simplicity of sitting underneath the tree together. Like, not like we haven't planned it, but those have been good times too, where maybe all the kids are inside and we're able to just sit outside for a few minutes together, those things. So sometimes it's not that we're having lots of quantity of that. Right now is a season where it feels like, even though our kids are older than babies, it reminds me a lot of when they were newborns in terms of what's required of us to engage in this season.
Being stuck in the house with everybody in it. They're not going out, and you're not getting that break.
Because our kids are actually doing a virtual school this year. Some of our kids have some underlying health issues, and that was the choice that we made. And so it's more intense than what's required of us. So I also think there's a lot of grace in that. It won't be forever, but we've had some quality times, and that's been good. So.
Okay.
And we watch cooking shows together.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes. And that's nice. Home improvement shows, you know, good middle-aged parent type shows.
My last question is, what made you, in the beginning, I mentioned a little bit about you guys. My last question was, what made you decide to do missionary work, and how has it impacted your life? And maybe share just a little bit about actually how you serve.
Well, we were both doing missionary work before we met each other, but for the same umbrella organization, but different ministries within that organization. So that was neat that God had called us irrespective of each other to serve in that way long before we knew each other. I was actually working for the government when God invited me into full-time ministry. And so initially I came to work for a ministry called the Impact Movement, which you know. And I came to help work on a magazine that Impact had at the time, and eventually did other things within, well, soon after I got to do some other things within the ministry. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, when I was working in my hometown, doing what I went to school to do within agriculture, and it was after university that I came to Jesus. That's when I, as an adult, discovered the message of the Bible, the God of the Bible, and I just had this major spiritual awakening that happened at that point. I was in my early 20s, and you know, it was that a time where I was asking God specific questions, and He was answering me specifically in really neat ways. And I remember one time I asked Him, "What is the purpose you have for my life?" Like, this was early on. And He led me to a passage in Isaiah that talked about being His servant, that the islands will wait for the message that He will bring, that kind of thing. And I was like, wow, that feels like, what would that be like to do that? And I remember asking God, how do you want to do that? And He led me to Psalm 37, verse 4, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. And at the time, I understood that to mean I should just tell God what I want to do for a job, and he'll fulfill his purpose through it. And so I wrote down a job description, and it involved like traveling the world and doing all this kind of stuff. And within a week after writing that job description, I was on a short-term mission trip unrelated to any other thing. And I met somebody there on that trip who described their job to me. And it was exactly the job description.
Oops, excuse me. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They were a missionary. I was like, who do you work for? Like, that's the most amazing job. I want that job. And they're like, I'm a missionary. Like, nobody wants this job. Are you serious? You should apply. I'll hire you right away. Anyway, and it was, traveling the world, and it was that list. And anyway, that's how God kind of got me hooked. Mm-hmm. And eventually, after years of traveling and doing that kind of thing, I started to get more of a burden to invest in the spiritual growth of others, and it wasn't so much about the thrill of traveling and taking God's message far and wide. It was more like, wow, I live in a place where there's people who don't know God all around us. How can we meet these people in this cultural context that we live in, where they are, and how can we help people take steps towards knowing God? And so that, I feel like that's where God used that to bring us to where we are and how we serve now here in the city of Orlando.
And can I say one last thing about calling for a second?
Yes.
We're out of time. Only because I think some of the people in this group might know the person who initially called me. So Sheila Adams now had called me, and she's the one who invited me to consider coming to work with Impact.
Wow.
Actually, she made the call. And at the time, I was, like I said, I was working for the government, and I left work that day. I was at work when she called, and I was walking to my car, and I was like, thank you, Jesus, that the answer is so clear that it is no. And then the next day, I think it was next day, I was driving somewhere for government business, listening to Christian radio. And the man was talking about decision making. And he said, when you think that the answer is really, really clear, that's when you really need to pray. And so, because that's just was my anthem the day before, I was like, well, that has something to do with me. And so that really started this. For me, it was several months of considering if I was willing to move in that direction. And it ended with, yes, I was. And that's how God initially led me on staff. So,
okay. Well, I'd like to take this moment to thank you, Joe and Keijo, for joining the show and sharing a little bit about what's happening in your life. And if someone is interested in getting in touch with you, how can they reach you?
I think the best way is by emailing me. joe.bollinger@crew.org. And Keijo and I both access email, so we can share that way. And yeah, if you email, we can talk more about whatever.
Okay. And then you do have a Facebook, and I'll share that. It's Joe and Keijo Bollinger.
Yeah. If you search for that, just like that, our Facebook page will come up. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share a little bit with us. And I encourage you, if you wanted to talk to Joe or Keijo, to connect with them and, find out more about their ministry and how they serve, and maybe ways that you can be a blessing to them. And I do want to share ask you to help us spread the word about couples, the couples group, Couples GBCCF, where we have different themes each month, share encouraging words, and invite you to help us spread the word. People are being blessed, and it's gone. We have couples in Germany and South Africa, also in the U.S. who are coming on and sharing and have said that they've been blessed by it. So help us spread the word. And if to the replay viewers, if you have a question of Joe and Keijo, put them in the comments, and I will get back in touch with them, and they'll be happy to respond. So thank you so much for being here today. And always like to end by saying, schedule a time to pray together as a couple and consecrate yourself and your marriage before the Lord. And if you have prayer requests, do put those in. And if there is a topic that you'd like us to cover, you'd say, I really want to know about something related to marriage, family, our relationship with the Lord, let us know, and we'll be happy to highlight that for one of our months. So thank you so much, and bye for now. God bless.
Thanks,
Bye.
Eva.
Bye.